Welcome back to another site visit. I'm Nick Schiffer. I got a special guest today. I got Vincent from Of Possible Architecture. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Nick.
So Vincent is the architect on our 45 White Oak project. You came at a great time because we have a foundation in the ground. So today I want to walk you through where we're at with the foundation on this project, talk about some of the details. We can talk about the ledge that we had to hammer out for weeks on end in order to accomplish this. From a bird's eye view, it's a simple L-shaped foundation in a very complicated site for a complicated build. Why?
We were trying to maximize the floor area and the volume that we could build per zoning here. And something that's really important to us is to make these projects feel like they're part of the landscape and they're nestled in. And so when you have a lot like this, where you're trying to maximize what you can build, it takes quite a bit of effort and a lot of subtle moves to have the building feel appropriate and feel comfortable in the site. And I think right now is a great part in the process where you can actually see that starting to feel nestled in. And there's a lot of specific relationships that it's great to see it at this stage in the process because those relationships are working out well. It's not so easy. There's a desire here to have 10-foot clear ceilings in the basement. You want a super deep foundation. I mean, not to mention all the ledge that had to be hammered out. And so being really mindful about positioning, trying to keep the formwork for the foundation as simple as possible, even top of the walls, minimizing the number of notches and different elevation heights to simplify the construction.
It's funny, we were standing across the street a minute ago, and when you're looking at it now, it's really up there.
It feels like it's really tall, but when when this gets graded up to finished grade, that's going to be about 8 inches above where you see the rebar on the concrete now. And when the landscaping's filled in, I mean, I actually think that the exposure that you have is going to feel really comfortable. It feels extra tall right now. It feels like there's an extra 3.5 feet here.
What we have going on, so we're standing in what will be the future driveway. To the right of me is this concrete wall that is completely waterproofed. All of that goes away. There's actually a retaining wall on the right here as well as on the left of the driveway. And this has this really beautiful masonry staircase.
That's built into the topography on the side. And then there's, what we call the land bridge, which is a deck that spans over the entire driveway. It gives you some outdoor covered parking. And it also...
It's about here, right, Vincent? It's about 10 feet?
Yeah, I think it's about 10 feet off the front of the home. And there's a large planter that's on top of a beam that makes that whole span. And so part of that overhang, it's functional, it's useful for outdoor parking, but it also breaks down the massing. So you get another layer of space before you encounter the primary facade of the building, which is in plane with the concrete wall.
I think, one of the considerations in the initial design was how many cars do we have to park here? And the consensus was you need at least a 3-car garage. Which we have. We have this beautiful 3-car garage, which will be professionally done and lit. But like you said, we have this bridge that is now 10 feet deep that, if you were to park outside, you're still actually protected.
Mm-hmm.
And some of you guys on some of the comments have actually called it, like a bat cave.
Yeah, there's a kind of,
it
feels like a New England bat cave. But I think that, all those moves, like the exterior stair that is going to be built into the grade over here, that large canopy, that land bridge that helps further break down the massing, and also the wall that'll be tapering along this side into kind of stone landscaping really helps further settle the building into this site. And so it's the sum of a lot of small moves that are going to make a very large home feel super comfortable on the property.
Yeah. In terms of the foundation itself, we were talking about, we have these 10-foot walls, or 10-foot ceilings actually. So we're up closer to a 12-foot foundation wall. But as I step in, we're in this 3-car garage. We have an entryway, mudroom, bathroom, living space, mechanical room back here. We talk about the simple form, but the really kind of intentional consideration as to where it was placed. A lot of that was dictated by not only zoning, but the wetland setback and things like that. This is almost entirely where the existing house was, and we grew in the back left here because we had the opportunity to do that. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So we couldn't go any further in that direction for the wetlands offset. and the prior foundation was about right here in terms of footprint. It wasn't quite as deep. We went deeper, as you know. And the only other area on the property where you could expand the footprint was out in this direction. So the kind of simple shape, the L shape, which is a kind of unusual plan shape for us to make, is a result of those constraints. But it also, when we go up top, creates a kind of outdoor courtyard on that side of the property, which is really, really nice, locking the building into the landscape. This geometry, it's also kind of natural flow off of the garage. Mechanical room and storage is going to be, this is a really ideal setup for when all the trades get in here to lay everything out for mechanicals. The stair will circulate up here into the dining room, and the stair that goes all the way to the top floor, and then a multi-purpose living space beyond that. Is a really intuitive layout.
Yeah, we actually, I think I told you this, but we actually had someone in Instagram send a DM that was interested in the property, and one of the questions came up was, is there space for a gym?
Yeah, and, there's plenty of space for a gym here.
Yeah, I was like, man, like standing here, I'm like, I could have everything I need plus some.
Yep.
In a space like this. But this is really that kind of adaptive space that can be extra living space. It could be a gym. It could be a kid's rec room. Really, whatever you really want. While we're standing here, the question's going to come up. Well, what's up with the step and the foundation up there? So what is that a product of?
Yeah. So again, we tried. Really to keep the geometry of the concrete pour as simple as possible. And that step is the result of an outdoor terrace that we have on this wing of the home. So there's another one of those outdoor terraces on that wing, but it's over grade. So this notches down to catch the framing for that outdoor porch.
So fun fact on the back left one, originally that basement was going to be another 15 feet, deep. For storage, but early on we knew we were going to run into ledge, and it was a natural, like, hey, let's just remove that. And from a cost savings perspective, not only it was the ledge, but here we're now essentially living space underneath outdoor space, underneath additional living space. So we had this element that we were essentially kind of carving out of the home that had to be waterproof. So now we're dealing with an at-grade roof system and things like that. So reducing it in the back corner made sense from a ledge perspective, but also a waterproofing perspective.
Yeah, and that's another reason to keep the geometry really simple, is when you have those sort of those moments where you're enclosing basement ceilings to the elements. You want, for continuity of waterproofing and insulation continuity, the simpler the geometry, the easier it's going to be to do that completely and integrally. These outdoor spaces are also covered by the second floor above, so they're positioned in a way where they're self-shaded from the elements to a degree. It's a really straightforward geometry that allows that detailing to be super simple.
We'll talk about insulation for just a minute. We have Rockwool comfort board, 5 inches comfort board being installed on the entire exterior of the foundation. That insulation goes all the way up to our sill. And then we actually have a continuous installation from that point up and over the roof. So we're really blanketing this entire home. Prior to installing the walls, we actually did a capillary break, which I know you specified on the drawings, but it's funny, every time I pause the form guys and say, hey, I'm going to spray the top of the footing, they always question
why.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, we've talked about this in other videos, but that footing is sitting in what is, essentially wet soil. And there's water here, there's ledge. We know that footing is going to see water. And capillary action essentially means that water is going to be sucking up into that footing. So by spraying the top of that footing, we're essentially blocking the moisture from hitting the bottom of the foundation wall, which could, I forget what the stats say, but it's something like 40 feet vertical.
Yeah, it can travel pretty far through concrete.
Our walls are sprayed all the way to the sill.
Yeah.
Generally, in construction, you're oftentimes seeing 12, 18, 24 inches of exposed foundation, and then you're seeing the siding. For us, we're waterproofing that entire wall, and then we have 5 inches of comfort board on it. But you've also detailed it in a way where that foundation's recessed.
Yeah, it is, and that's, when you over-insulate the exterior, the building envelope, you end up with this detail, which I kind of like, and it's purely performative. The envelope of the building looks like it's floating. It's kind of like hovering right above the landscape, and so there's a couple of details there to get right to really take advantage of that effect, which is nice. I mean, especially a home like this that's going to be really massive. The cladding is massive, and having that deep shadow gap at grade is really elegant. That kind of hovering that's achieved. But yeah, there's a couple steps there. I mean, bringing the waterproofing all the way up to the top of the wall. Of course, the sill plates are going to be about 12 inches above grade when that's done. The siding will hang past that, and we're using a masonry siding so that all will be able to dry well. It was actually I think the job captain on the prior project we were at this morning was asking about that, about bringing the brick siding that close to grade, and if there was concern about, he had worked with a cementitious product that was really not getting a chance to dry. It was absorbing moisture. It was really low to grade. And this isn't going to have that issue. The rain screen will come past the outside of the foundation wall. This is brick rain screen system without any mortar in it, so it's going to be able to dry very easily.
And that's the Peterson Tegel cover that we've shared in some of our social posts. What you just hit on is one of the biggest benefits, is that there's no mortar.
Yeah.
And it really is, I think they even maybe claim that it's completely maintenance free, where this is a 200+ year product that, there really isn't a chance for it to fail.
That's I'd be really curious to know the actual lifespan of that product, because it's essentially a brick without any mortar that can dry perfectly. So I'm imagining like really old medieval buildings or old brick buildings that had a mortar base that was really able to dry evenly, and that material is still integral 500 years later. We see sometimes in brick row houses or work that we do in the city where if the wrong kind of mortar was used, the brick doesn't have a great chance to dry as easily. So there's a couple things going for it. Combining that kind of material with the rain screen and the proper detailing it's a generational home that's going to be built.
Talk to me a little bit about our ledger detail and why we have a double bolt pattern on top of the wall. What was really driving that in terms of design?
We have a lot of glass on the ground floor that's seamless. So the sills, the jambs, everything is captured by framing on the side. And we wanted to create an assembly where we could do that without having to fuss with the concrete pour. So all that material sits in framing that takes care of all the different geometries for very large lift slide door. It will all look incredibly consistent, but there's a lot of different sill conditions for all the glass on this building, and you'll see that in framing when it comes together. That's all easier to capture in framing than it is to do. And this is a really nice concrete scope that was done here, but the tolerances of concrete are different. The carpenters can hold a tighter tolerance more easily.
And I think that's, like you say, fuss with concrete, and what that really means is building in a shelf detail to support that ledger, rather than essentially fixing the ledger to the inside of the wall.
From our experience and a lot of time talking to subs and to contractors about looking for the kind of way to do it where the constructability is more seamless and kind of works with the ideal skill sets of each trade.
We talked about the inside. We have the interior perimeter drain, but we also have a perimeter drain on the outside, which will tie into daylight as well. But third, which we don't have quite yet, but we actually have we capture all the rainwater up at an upper level to get all that water out and disperse that to daylight as well.
There's basically 4 perimeters of gutter on the building, inside and outside of footing, at subsurface, at grade, and then the gutters at the eaves.
This is really why it's so important. Just for scale, right?
Yeah.
I'm 7 foot tall.
Yeah, me too. It's,
I'm about 6 foot, and this is solid rock, and essentially water is coming down through this rock. Below us is solid rock. Here is solid concrete.
The only way the water and pressure is going to be alleviated is at the footing drain here and out that way. And it's a pretty good volume. It's a pool's worth of water out here. It is worth doing all the waterproofing and detailing of this the right way. Well, you can sleep well knowing that this will all be managed.
Yeah, I would argue that there's maybe even a 5th line of defense where we're grading it too, where that water isn't just sitting up top and going vertically down. we're getting it away from the house, and then whatever is left, it is hitting this drain and getting out, and then whatever recharges the ground, it's either captured by the interior footing or the sump, and then removed from the house again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one thing that where we're standing right now is actually a future.
Yeah, there's going to be a mechanical pit above, and I think that's going to work, to everyone's advantage here, that it's going to be sunk and so well acoustically insulated, so the neighbors don't have to hear that. You're not going to hear it in this home through all the insulation.
Yeah, truthfully, on the drawings, it was something that was going to be exposed, and we'd have to build a wall around it. But now this is very likely going to be the wall around it. So it works really nice. You'll have all access to all the air handlers on the backside here for service. I want to go up to that area that we were going to excavate and we didn't, and just chat through why we didn't, and we can see the
let's
ledge.
look at that.
So we're coming up the side of the house, and this is really just like a mechanical side of the house. That's where our mechanical pit is. Everything that we're doing back here is nestled down and in. Now that especially with the foundation in place, we actually really get to understand and appreciate how much privacy this small lot actually has.
So this will be outdoor dining and an outdoor kitchen along that back wall. Indoor kitchen, indoor breakfast area, like informal dining, outdoor dining and outdoor kitchen along that whole back wall. And then this edge, which you can kind of see with some of the rough topography here, will be a retaining wall that's, a kind of landscape wall that extends out until it tapers off at the other end of the lawn. And so this shape is, the L kind of captures that edge, and you get this outdoor courtyard effect.
Yeah.
And on both ends of the plan, it's anchored by outdoor covered space, these kind of generous porches like you'd have kind of traditionally in New England. So even though it doesn't look like a traditional home, it has the kind of traditional features of living here.
Yeah, so that's very much outdoor living room, and we've situated that near the creek, and this is where the outdoor dining and kitchen is.
Yep.
I'm talking, into some of the selections here, but one of the things that we're doing is an electric grill, which I think is super cool. And just for reference, there's actually no gas in this house.
Yep.
It's part of the design. It's part of the intent. It's an all-electric house. We've actually went through the process of building a really efficient house to the point where we were looking at a passive level construction, not certified, but taking a lot of the practices out of passive house building and implementing them here at 45 White Oak.
Yeah, I mean, this is essentially designed with passive house level performance as the target. And so, part of the passive home engineering that goes into this really, sets the project up that if a client or if somebody wanted to go all the way, it's easily pointed in that direction. Like, there's nothing about the geometry, there's nothing about the bones or the initial moves that would get in the way of increasing that or achieving that level of performance, but all the way down to selections like the electric outdoor grill on it.
Yeah. So going back to foundation just for a moment, we have these two piers, and they're very shallow, and the reason is that we're actually sitting on solid rock here.
Yeah, so we switched these footings we had the engineers issue an SK and be able to pin directly to ledge to minimize the excavation further, minimize the concrete work.
So much so that we have this hump of ledge that will
yes.
end up right underneath our
They
deck.
only excavated what they needed to.
Some of you guys have asked why not do a patio or pavers on the outside, and it's really just not the palette we're looking for. We have this beautiful masonry exterior of the home, and by introducing wood on the garage door and the entry and the decks, it kind of softens the two anchors.
Yeah, the continuity of material, so you're using the same material in each location consistently, is another one of these subtle moves that are going to make a home this size feel really personal, really kind of intimate in scale, and really consistent. Not switching the material up throughout the palette.
And lastly, speaking of the engineer, the guys over at Hayes O'Neill who have been great on this project, we worked through this retaining wall as well, where originally not only did we have a basement in that location, which we removed because of ledge and just from an overall cost perspective. But we also had this, full height retaining wall that went all the way down. And once we got through kind of understanding the site a little bit more specifically, we realized we can do that with a landscape wall.
Yep.
And this is, quite frankly, this is all solid ledge as well. So rather than excavating down and trying to put a footing in, and it just it got to a point where it was just unnecessary. Mm-hmm. So we'll build the home, and then we'll actually have a wall back here, which will actually double as a bench. There's a section where it steps, and
it's designed as 2 tiers, so you could put planters on it, landscaping, kind of spill over the top, and
kids can run down it,
And I love that part where you have a very large outdoor feature that the whole thing can be used as furniture. Yeah. It's like your lawn becomes a piece of furniture that you can sit on.
And doing that in, more of a when I say landscape wall, I'm thinking it's CMU, or it could be cast in place, but ultimately the finishes will be that brick that will mimic the front retaining walls.
Yeah.
And really, this is really the whole courtyard feel that you were talking about. We're kind of anchored by, kitchen here. Then we have our entry, which is a beautiful pass-through of glass, which also is our dining room. And then we have the living room here that you're situated with glass on both corners, and then ties into our outdoor living space.
Yeah, the house kind of has 2 lives. On the ground floor, it's very transparent. There's floor-to-ceiling glass, large lengths up to 8 to 12. I think the largest one is 21 feet wide. And so on the ground floor, when you're in the back of the property, it's going to feel like you're in a kind of pavilion home that's very much open to the landscape and seamless with the outdoors. Yeah. So you'll have that sort of more traditional sense of enclosure and privacy in the home on the second floor of the building, but a totally different life on the ground floor.
It's interesting, like that play on window size and, clear span windows versus like punched openings plays into the privacy really well here. But additionally, what we kind of noticed standing here is that house is so elevated, and you have this tier of landscape and then eventually plantings, that even standing in this backyard or being in the living room with all glass, that home, though close to us, actually feels pretty private.
Yeah, it's going to be just a little bit of landscaping where the construction fence is now, that will block that off completely from view.
Yeah, and similar to this home and even the home over there, where this neighborhood, the lot's not very big. It's a little under 1/2 of an acre. The homes are relatively close.
And there is a decent amount of topography. I mean, the site drops off significantly down to the street on that side. It tapers down to the brook on that side. And so this massing, that L-shaped plan, and little moves like nestling the retaining wall into the backside of the yard here, it really activates the building in all those outdoor spaces. So it's not just about transparency and seamlessness between the interior and the exterior, but it's the positioning of the different room types and different elevations to, not just sit the building on the property or level the whole thing, but to take advantage of all that topography. And that's the kind of landscapes, that kind of topography is really, unique to New England landscapes. And so making that part of the architecture is fun, and it all happens on a relatively modest sized property.
Yeah, and I think, we talked about this before in video and off camera as well, but this is a challenging site.
Yeah, it's there's a reason why no one else was working on this property before you, Nick.
And hey, frankly, like I said to you, I'm like, do you think we could pull this off? And I think we have. And,
yeah, definitely.
We've literally set the foundation for this project, and even some of the initial feedback we've gotten from even the town, like, impressed with how we've maximized the site, the lot, the opportunity here, but done so in a way that, they've said themselves, quote, you've improved the lot compared to what was here before, which is amazing.
Something that we're keeping in mind working in this kind of neighborhood is where you have proximity to a lot of other homes and properties, and that's the context. Like, it's equally as important as the landscape here. And of course, we're gonna design a project that is contemporary, that is working with materials that are not only appropriate but are behaving a little bit differently, and trying to imagine an architecture that is, on the one hand familiar, like it doesn't feel like it's out of place or it's kind of frivolous. So it's familiar on the one hand, but it's new, and kind of surprises you in that you feel comfortable with it in a way. And so even across the street, this is some brick on that building, but we were inspired by a couple of the vernacular tropes for New England architecture. So heavy cedar shingles or clapboard with that kind of horizontal shadow line that you see on siding. In this neighborhood, there are a kind of number of federal style brick homes that are really sort of like stoic, and they're really kind of proud buildings, and hip roofs and sort of the articulated roof geometry. And so the design for 45 White Oak translates those things, and the decision to use the Peterson Teagle brick shingle plays with all the visual references for siding on projects like this. There's a particular name for the kind of hip roof that we created, but that geometry too. On the one hand, it feels really sharp and trim, but also a little bit familiar. So that was the goal.
It was interesting, like early on in the design, we've been working on the design for a year now, but that roof line changed slightly a lot. Mm-hmm. Like we were looking at higher pitch, lower pitch, and and I remember, and even some of the like window locations, they were very intentional with that in terms of like how it played with the overall site. Because one of the things I said in the beginning of this video is when we stood across the street, wow, that's way up there. The house is way up there. And I'm standing here, and I'm like, no, the house is right here. But all of those things were really considered in the design, which plays off of everything we've talked about today. Is and a buzzword for me is being intentional, and this is exactly what we've accomplished here. Is here's the site we're given. We need to be super intentional with it in order for us to pull off what we're looking to pull off.
Yeah, that I don't think that's a buzzword. I think that's a really useful mantra.
Well, apparently I should own the trademark.
Intentionality.
To YouTube, so.
No, but it really it means a lot. I mean, I was just talking to another builder about this the other day, where obviously in the architecture that we design, a lot of intentionality goes into that, and there's a kind of you have to be very aware and very open, the kind of intentionality you have about the context, about the landscape, about all these different things that you kind of feed into the project. But that other builder, we were talking to them, about why be so intentional, and down to the point where like, does it really have to line up? Like, it's not going to work any better if it's aligned versus misaligned. But I think there's a kind of spirit to the craft that is a continuity of the spirit of how it's designed, and that intentionality, it gives presence to the quality of the way it's made. So that's, if you can trademark it, you should.
I think that might be pretty hard. So guys, what we're working on in the background, besides what you see, of course, there's going to be what is directly related to the next step in this project, such as below grade insulation, prepping for the slab, below slab plumbing and utilities. But we're also working with a panel manufacturer to build this entire home. So you guys have been working closely with them. This entire home is actually modeled in 3D. And completely componentized. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to use it. And to the point where you can spin around and see every single piece of lumber and know exactly how this thing is going to be framed and put together.
The project leader on this project, Vincenzo, in our office, has been working really closely with Cape Cod Panel. And this is interesting for the people watching this who kind of know about design software and the back end of these things. A project this scale and this level of complexity is like right on the fence between where you might draft it in CAD versus use a kind of full 3D building information model like Revit. And so this project we developed in CAD, because of the speed and the amount of iteration and all the custom detailing, But when it came time to rationalizing it for construction and the framing package, Cape Cod Panel is incredible because they were able to take that documentation and very quickly build a full 3D framing package. It's going to be super low waste, all cut off-site, ready to be, numbered and ready to be assembled. But that level of coordination on the framing for a project this custom is, really requires a lot of attention to detail on the back end before anything is on site.
Yeah. So that we'll be touching base on that in a future episode. If you guys want to learn more about this, obviously follow our social media channels at Of Possible on Instagram for Vincent and his crew. And if you want to see specific about this project, 45 the number, whiteoak.com. This home will be hitting the market here in just a short amount of time. Stay tuned to the next episode. We'll see you then.